Black mom forced to change. Baby on floor. She made Airline's brand tank in 3 tweets. They say 1 tweet can change the world. But what if it took 3? Welcome to a story where the flight from New York to Atlanta spirals into a shocking confrontation, shatters an airline's reputation overnight, and exposes hidden prejudices at 30,000 feet. Meet Aniyah Graves, a determined, devoted black mother, traveling with her restless infant son, King. Her desperate search for a dignified space to change her baby led to a humiliating moment on a filthy airplane floor. In just 3 fiery tweets, her story ignited social media and made headlines across the globe. Buckle up, because this journey is about to take off. Aniyah Graves was 29 years old, a savvy tech consultant who had worked hard for every dime she had ever earned. She lived in Harlem, New York, and was no stranger to adversity, having grown up in a neighborhood where resources were scarce, but community spirit was abundant. She had saved meticulously for months, juggling a high-stress job with the responsibilities of new motherhood, just to afford this trip. The destination was Atlanta, Georgia, where her grandmother's 80th birthday celebration was set to be a large family reunion. Aniyah, determined to attend, decided to fly on Delta Airlines, one of the biggest and most recognized airlines in the United States, believing it would be the safest, most reputable choice. She had heard only good things about Delta's customer service and on-time performance, and paid extra for a seat with slightly more legroom, hoping to make her baby boy King as comfortable as possible. Standing at the gate, rocking King in her arms, Aniyah felt a mixture of anxiety and excitement. She had never before traveled alone with her child, who was only 8 months old. Friends and colleagues had told her about the challenges of flying with an infant, from the moment you board to the moment you land. There was no guarantee of peace. Babies fuss, cry, and need constant care, all in a cramped metal tube. Yet Aniyah remained optimistic. She had meticulously prepared for this trip, packing enough diapers, wipes, bottles, and spare outfits to handle any situation. When the boarding announcement crackled over the intercom, Aniyah took a deep breath. She secured King's baby carrier around her torso, slung her diaper bag over her shoulder, and rolled a small carry-on behind her. She stood in line with other passengers. Some were families, others were business travelers, in suits tapping away at smartphones. A few of them offered polite smiles. Another mother with a toddler perched on her hip gave Aniyah a look that seemed to say, "Hang in there, sister." Aniyah returned a grateful smile. Finally, it was her turn to hand over her boarding pass. The gate attendant gave it a quick scan and said brightly, "Have a pleasant flight." Miss Graves, Aniyah thanked her, and stepped onto the jet bridge, feeling the cool draft from the air conditioning inside the aircraft tunnel. This was it, the final stretch before liftoff. The second she stepped onto the plane, a distinct blend of coffee, stale air, and disinfectant enveloped her senses. The flight attendants greeted her with carefully practiced smiles, though one seemed friendlier than the others. She made her way to her seat on the right side near the window. It was a Delta Comfort Plus seat that offered a bit more space. She carefully nestled King against her chest and took her place, placing the diaper bag under the seat in front. Once settled, she looked around, feeling the tension in her shoulders ease slightly. She was here on the plane, and the hardest part, getting to the airport and through security with an infant, was behind her. Or so she thought. The plane slowly filled up. A middle-aged woman in a floral blouse sat by the aisle, leaving the middle seat empty between her and Aniyah. The woman offered a quick nod, but seemed more interested in her crossword puzzle than striking up conversation. Across the aisle, a well-dressed businessman scrolled on his phone, oblivious to anyone around him. Flight attendants moved briskly up and down the aisle, helping some passengers stow carry-ons and instructing others to put away large backpacks. Aniyah was relieved the middle seat remained vacant. That little extra room would make it easier to manage King if he got fussy. She lifted him from his carrier and placed him on her lap, gently bouncing him. King stared wide-eyed at the flurry of strangers, bright lights and overhead compartments. Aniyah had never seen him so curious. She smiled, grateful that he wasn't wailing. Just as she was beginning to relax, a voice erupted a few rows behind her. "Mom, you can't put that bag there. It needs to go under your seat." A flight attendant, stern-faced and seemingly on edge, was lecturing a passenger who had tried to place an oversized backpack in the overhead bin. The passenger grumbled, but complied. The flight attendant was Poogan Harris. Her name tag was pinned to her crisp navy blue uniform. She was short in stature, but carried herself with an air of authority. Aniyah's eyes flicked to Poogan, and then quickly away, hoping she wouldn't draw any attention. Nothing seemed outwardly unusual, just a typical busy flight with a no-nonsense attendant. Yet a tiny knot of apprehension formed in Aniyah's stomach. Minutes later, the overhead bins were closed, and the plane began to push back from the gate. The safety demonstration commenced. Aniyah had King strapped securely in her lap, the infant seatbelt extension in place. She listened intently as the head flight attendant delivered instructions. But Poogan, the stern flight attendant, kept pacing the aisles, occasionally shooting glances at certain passengers as though she was still on the lookout for rule breakers. Aniyah chalked it up to Poogan simply being thorough. Perhaps she was new or stressed. After all, flight attendants had a difficult job ensuring the safety and comfort of hundreds of strangers in a confined space. Still, each time Poogan's eyes skimmed over her row, Aniyah felt a subtle sense of unease. She told herself she was being paranoid. Poogan was probably just making sure the seatbelts were fastened. Once the plane lifted off, Aniyah clutched King's little hand, giving him a reassuring rub on the back. The gentle roar of the engines and the vibrations beneath them seemed to lull King into a peaceful state. He seemed more fascinated than terrified, his tiny fists opening and closing. All of Aniyah's worries about him crying and disturbing passengers melted away in that moment. She felt a rush of gratitude. Perhaps the flight would be smooth sailing. About 30 minutes after takeoff, the seatbelt sign dinged off. Passengers began to move about. Some rummaged in their bags, others rose to use the lavatories. Flight attendants prepared the beverage carts. Aniyah felt the dryness in her throat and was grateful she'd soon have a drink. King was dozing on her lap, drool pooling near her elbow, and she gently dabbed it away with a burp cloth. Then a sharp cry from King signaled he was no longer asleep. Aniyah checked the time. Right on schedule. She thought King usually needed a bottle or a bit of soothing around this time. She carefully unbuckled her seatbelt, intending to head to the lavatory for privacy. But Poogan was suddenly there, stepping into their row. "Please remain seated for just a bit longer," Poogan said in a clipped tone. "We'll be serving drinks soon." Aniyah paused. "I just need to change and feed my baby," she explained softly, not wanting to disturb other passengers. "He's fussy, and the lavatory might be the best place for me to do that." Poogan pursed her lips. "If it's just feeding, you can do it at your seat. But we're about to start the drink service. It's best you wait until the aisle is clear." Aniyah was taken aback by the abrupt manner. She offered a polite smile. "All right, I'll wait, if that's what's required." Poogan nodded curtly and moved on her posture. Stiff, Aniyah tried to soothe King in her seat. She pulled out a small bottle of formula, tested the temperature, and began feeding him. He guzzled eagerly, but soon the fussiness returned, and she realized something else. King needed a diaper change. Desperately, she could smell it. She tried to remain calm, hoping Poogan would pass their row quickly with the beverage cart so she could slip into the lavatory. 15 more minutes passed, and King grew more distressed. People around Aniyah began to notice. The mother across the aisle shot her a sympathetic glance. The woman in the floral blouse next to her offered a tight-lipped smile that suggested annoyance more than concern. Aniyah could only bounce King gently and whisper comforting words to him. "It's okay, baby. Mama's got you." Finally, the beverage cart reached their row Poogan, and another attendant were distributing cups of soda water and small snack bags. Aniyah held out her hand to decline the drink, her focus solely on King. Once the cart rolled past, she retrieved the diaper bag from under the seat and gently eased herself into the aisle. Poogan, who was now taking a drink order from someone else, noticed Aniyah's movement and arched an eyebrow. "I need to go to the lavatory to change my baby," Aniyah stated, trying to keep her voice calm. Poogan looked at King, who was squirming and letting out distressed cries. "The seatbelt sign isn't on." "Go ahead," she responded curtly, as if granting permission. Aniyah hurried down the aisle, King in her arms, diaper bag slung over her shoulder. Upon entering the cramped lavatory, Aniyah realized there was a tiny pull-down shelf intended for diaper changes, but it was smaller than she had imagined, and the space was even more cramped with her carrying King. She tried to juggle him the diaper bag and the door. On top of that, the shelf appeared flimsy. She tested it. It wobbled under her hand. "Is this safe?" she wondered. She decided to attempt it anyway. Carefully laying a changing pad on the shelf, she placed King on top, but his legs nearly dangled off the side. Concerned, she tried to keep a hand on him at all times. The angle was awkward, and King, feeling the precariousness, began to fuss louder. The walls seemed to close in. When the plane jolted lightly with turbulence, her heart skipped a beat. Imagining him rolling off, she managed to unfasten the soiled diaper, but in that moment, King kicked his legs wildly. The diaper fell to the floor with a wet plop, and Aniyah nearly lost grip of a wipe. She was stuck, leaning awkwardly, her foot braced against the door to keep it closed. Her left arm pinned under King, and her right hand fumbling for more wipes. Another bout of turbulence rattled the walls. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she secured a fresh diaper. Her own back ached from the contorted position. She exhaled in relief. "At least that's done," she thought. She stuffed the used diaper in the garbage, sanitized her hands, and tried to gather everything. The moment she opened the lavatory door, Poogan was standing there, arms folded. "There are other passengers waiting to use the lavatory," Poogan said sharply, eyeing Aniyah as if she had committed a crime by taking too long. "I'm sorry," Aniyah managed. She was too exhausted to argue and just wanted to return to her seat. Poogan turned on her heel and walked away, not bothering to see if Aniyah needed any assistance. Aniyah felt a pang of resentment flare in her chest. Yes, flight attendants were busy, but a little empathy for a mother traveling alone with an infant would have gone a long way. She breathed deeply, telling herself it was just a minor annoyance. She returned to her seat, hoping the worst was over. The flight continued uneventfully for a short while, long enough for Aniyah to catch her breath. King, now with a fresh diaper and some formula in his belly, drifted off to sleep again. Aniyah allowed herself a moment to rest. Leaning back against the headrest, eyes closed. Suddenly turbulence caused the plane to lurch. The captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've hit a patch of rough air. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts." Aniyah checked King. He whimpered, but stayed mostly asleep. She rebuckled her seatbelt, careful to keep King secure in her arms. The plane rattled, seatbelt sign illuminated, and a shaky hush fell over the cabin. After 10 minutes of jostling, The turbulence subsided, and the captain gave the all-clear to move about. Passengers breathed an audible sigh of relief. It wasn't long after that. King woke again, fussing. This time, Aniyah felt a distinct wetness on her arm. Alarmed, she realized his diaper had leaked. He just had a diaper change. How could it leak already? She guessed the sudden turbulence had jostled him, or maybe she had misapplied the diaper while contorted in the tiny lavatory. Either way, it was urgent. She made eye contact with Poogan, who was a few rows ahead, chatting with her colleague Aniyah, waved a hand tentatively to catch her attention. Poogan met her gaze, but did not move closer. Aniyah mouthed, "I need to change him again," tapping King's diaper to illustrate the point. Poogan's brow furrowed. She pointed at the overhead seatbelt sign, but it was off. Aniyah looked up to verify. Confused, she motioned again that she needed the lavatory. Poogan shook her head, as if to say, "No." She then continued her conversation with the other flight attendant. Aniyah's heart pounded confusion, blending with a rising sense of indignation. Why was Poogan ignoring her? She glanced around, unsure what to do. The other flight attendant, a taller man with a calmer demeanor, was busy handing out water to a passenger across the aisle. He hadn't noticed Aniyah's attempts to get attention. Meanwhile, King's fussing escalated, and the smell of a soiled diaper was no longer subtle. Finally, Aniyah took matters into her own hands. She rose from her seat, holding King Poogan, immediately intercepted her in the aisle. Aniyah kept her voice controlled but urgent. "My baby's diaper leaked. I need to change him now. Can I please use the lavatory?" Poogan narrowed her eyes. "Mum, the seatbelt sign was just on. We're expecting more turbulence. But the light is off now," Aniyah pointed out. "And we have no idea when it might come back. My baby is soaked." Poogan drew a sharp breath. "I can't have you endangering yourself or the rest of the passengers. Turbulence can happen at any moment. You need to remain seated." She pointed down the aisle. "Please sit down until I give you permission." Aniyah felt a blaze of anger. Endangering how? By changing a diaper in the lavatory with the seatbelt sign off, Poogan stood straighter, her expression rigid. "Mom, I am the flight attendant on duty here, and I'm telling you to remain seated. If you fail to comply, I will have to notify the captain." Other passengers began to stare. Murmurs filled the cabin. The mother across the aisle looked sympathetic, yet uncertain. The businessman in the suit frowned, clearly annoyed by the commotion. Aniyah hesitated, torn between her maternal instinct and the pressure of authority. She didn't want to cause a scene, nor did she want to risk an escalation. But King needed immediate attention. Resigned, she slowly returned to her seat, back in her seat. Aniyah desperately tried to figure out a solution. Every second that passed, King grew more uncomfortable, and his cries increased in volume. Passengers turned heads in her direction. She saw the frustration in the floral-bloused woman's eyes, as though blaming Aniyah for failing to soothe her child. Aniyah felt the weight of judgment from all sides, even though the situation was out of her control. She tried to calm King in her lap, but the diaper leak was too severe. His onesie was drenched. Aniyah could see the wet stain spreading across her own clothes. She glanced down the aisle. Poogan was once more engaged in conversation, ignoring them entirely, as King's cries became more piercing. Tears of frustration welled in Aniyah's eyes. She rummaged through the diaper bag, pulling out a fresh diaper wipes and a changing pad. If Poogan wouldn't allow her to use the lavatory, perhaps she could do it in her seat. But there was barely enough room to maneuver. The seat itself was narrow, and King was thrashing in discomfort. "Is there any place with a bit more room?" She looked to the space near the cabin doors where flight attendants sometimes stood. It was occupied by galley carts. The middle seat next to her was taken by the floral-bloused woman. The floor was that even safe. The idea disgusted and embarrassed her, but she was running out of options. Finally, in desperation, she placed the changing pad on the cabin floor near her feet, just in front of her seat. She gently laid King down, whispering apologies into his ear. His cries turned to frantic shrieks, the unfamiliar horizontal position on the floor scaring him. People around her gasped or stared in disbelief. Some leaned over to watch, but no one offered assistance. Aniyah's hands shook as she unfastened the wet onesie and peeled away the soggy diaper. The floor was cold, and she couldn't stop imagining the germs lurking there, but Poogan had left her no choice. This was humiliating, and tears blurred her vision. A swirl of shame, anger, and despair filled her chest. How did it come to this? The flight attendant! Poogan suddenly appeared aghast. "Mom, what are you doing?" she demanded. "This is unsanitary. You can't just lay your baby on the floor." Aniyah glared up, tears streaming. "You wouldn't let me use the lavatory. Where else am I supposed to go? He's leaking, and I can't wait for your permission. Forever." Poogan's cheeks reddened. "This is unacceptable. You're disturbing other passengers. I'm disturbing them." Aniyah fired back, voice quivering. "You forced me to do this because you refused to let me change him in the lavatory." By now, the entire section of the plane was watching the confrontation. Some had their phones out, filming. A wave of embarrassment washed over Aniyah, but also a sense of righteous indignation. She finished wiping King, replaced his diaper, and bundled the soiled clothes into a plastic bag. Poogan stood above them, lips set in a thin line, looking ready to call security the moment the plane landed. The scene was chaotic, but eventually Aniyah managed to pick up King, cradling him against her chest, his screams subsiding into trembling whimpers. Poogan opened her mouth to speak, but the overhead intercom beeped, and the pilot's voice emerged. Flight attendants prepare for descent. Chapter 7. A quiet landing and a brewing storm. The seatbelt sign illuminated again. Everyone hurried to stow their personal items. Poogan's furious expression flickered with uncertainty. She pointed a finger at Aniyah, as if to say, "This isn't over," then turned on her heel and marched down the aisle. Aniyah buckled herself in, holding King close. She could feel her heart pounding, adrenaline still coursing through her veins. For the remainder of the flight, Poogan avoided. Aniyah, who sat quietly, eyes cast downward. She wanted nothing more than to land and get off that plane. She felt humiliated and drained. Yet beneath that humiliation was a growing spark of outrage. How could they treat me like this? She replayed the event in her mind. Poogan ignoring her, refusing to let her use the lavatory, then berating her publicly for changing King on the floor. The moral injustice festered like a wound. When the wheels finally touched down in Atlanta, the cabin erupted in that usual chorus of seatbelts unclicking and phones chiming to life. People stood stretching to retrieve their overhead luggage. Aniyah waited until the aisle began to clear, before standing. Her clothes still bore the damp evidence of King's leaked diaper. She was exhausted mentally and physically. As she shuffled her way off the plane, she noticed Poogan standing at the doorway, giving mechanical farewells to passengers. When Aniyah approached, Poogan did not look her in the eye. She muttered, "Have a good day," in a tone that might as well have been, "Go away." Aniyah said nothing in return. After grabbing her checked luggage, Aniyah moved quickly through the bustle of Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. She wanted to find a quiet corner to gather herself, change her own stained clothes, and feed King in peace. She found a family restroom near baggage claim. Inside, she locked the door and leaned against the wall, tears finally streaming freely. King, sensing her distress, began crying too. She took a few minutes to calm down, changed into a clean shirt from her luggage, and rummaged for a fresh outfit for King. Once they were both in dry clothes, she stepped out into the corridor, but the anger still simmered. She needed to do something, anything, to release the emotional storm swirling within her. On a bench nearby, she sat down and pulled out her phone. Instinctively, she opened Twitter. Aniyah had around 1,500 followers, mostly colleagues, friends, and a few acquaintances she'd met in the tech industry. She wasn't a major influencer, but she knew how quickly social media stories could spread if they struck a chord. Her thumbs hovered over the screen, the events replaying in her mind. She typed furiously, one tweet, number of one. "I've never been so humiliated in my life." Delta flight attendant refused to let me change my baby's leaking diaper in the lavatory. I was forced to do it on the dirty cabin floor. Discrimination, Waterloo travel nightmare. She hit tweet. Her pulse raced. She typed again. Tweet number 2. Yes, I'm a black mother, traveling alone with my baby. The flight attendant treated me like trash, ignored me, then scolded me in front of everyone. What, Delta? Is this how you train your staff? Unacceptable. She pressed tweet once more. 3 tweet number 3. I'm shaken, embarrassed, furious. This is 2025, and we're still dealing with this. Mums especially. Black mums deserve better. Els Delta, you owe me and my baby. An apology. Boycott. Delta. Mums unite. Aniyah exhaled. A wave of catharsis washed over her, though the anger still pricked at her conscience. She put her phone away. She couldn't change what happened, but at least she could let the world know. She had no idea how these 3 tweets would echo far beyond her immediate circle, igniting a firestorm Delta never saw coming. By the time Aniyah made it to her grandmother's house, the Twitter notifications were pouring in. She set her phone to vibrate, focusing on greeting her family. Hugs, laughter, and warmth filled her grandmother's living room. Balloons spelled out 80 in glittering gold. Relatives milled about, praising how big King had grown. For a precious moment, she managed to push the flight ordeal out of her mind. Later that evening, once the celebrations quieted, and King was asleep in a borrowed crib, Aniyah decided to check Twitter. Her heart pounded at what she saw: hundreds of retweets, likes, and comments. People were tagging Delta with hashtags like Ganawa Mums Unite, Dinoam Boycott, Delta, and Black Moms Deserve Better. Well-known mommy bloggers and a few social justice influencers had shared her tweets, adding their own outraged commentary. Aniyah's phone buzzed almost constantly with new alerts. Some messages were supportive. "We stand with you." Others shared similar experiences. "Delta did the same thing to me last year." Some were nasty, accusing her of overreacting or playing the race card. But the positive messages outweighed the negative ones. In the space of a few hours, her story was going viral. Unbeknownst to her, multiple news outlets were picking up on the tweets. A local Atlanta journalist reached out via direct message, asking for an interview. Aniyah's head spun. She set her phone aside, anxiety and adrenaline mixing in her chest. She needed rest. Tomorrow was a new day, and it appeared it would come with newfound attention. Early the next morning, Aniyah awoke to find her phone with hundreds of new notifications. While she fed King in her grandmother's quaint kitchen, she skimmed through the messages. One stood out, a request from a major news network that wanted her on their afternoon broadcast to talk about her ordeal. There were also multiple direct messages from Delta's official Twitter account, apologizing for her inconvenience and asking for her booking details so they could investigate the matter. Meanwhile, across the country, Delta's social media and public relations teams were in full-blown crisis mode. Overnight, boycott Delta and discrimination in the air had trended nationwide. Stock analysts noted an early dip in Delta's share prices as the story picked up momentum on morning news shows. The airline found itself in a precarious position, known for decent customer service. It was now under scrutiny for alleged discrimination and negligence toward a black mother traveling alone with an infant. A wave of negative press erupted. Old stories of airline mishaps, delayed flights, lost luggage. Previous discriminatory claims resurfaced, each post using Aniyah's tweets as a catalyst. Public sentiment, especially among mothers and communities of color, was turning swiftly against Delta. Calls for an official apology and a policy review reverberated online. By noon, mainstream news websites carried headlines like "Black Mother, Forced to Change," "Baby on Floor," "During Delta Flight," and "Airline in Hot Water." Over alleged discrimination, video snippets from passengers who had recorded the incident circulated showing Aniyah hunched on the floor with King. The image was heartbreaking and enraging for many viewers. One particularly damning video showed Poogan's dismissive reaction, fueling the outrage further inside Delta's corporate headquarters in Atlanta. Crisis meetings erupted. The CEO, George Whitmore, summoned his top PR executives, the airline's legal counsel, and a handful of high-ranking operational managers for an emergency strategy session. The mood was tense. These were the kind of headlines that could tarnish a brand's reputation for years. "We need to get a handle on this," Whitmore said, pacing the conference room. He held up his phone, which displayed Aniyah's tweets. "What exactly happened on that flight? Has anyone talked to the flight attendant involved?" A senior operations manager, Linda Feng, cleared her throat. "We've spoken briefly with Poogan Harris. She claims the mother was disregarding instructions during turbulence and that she only insisted on compliance with safety regulations. We're still gathering statements from other crew members." The head of PR, Samantha Lee, looked grim, whether that's true or not. The public narrative is that we forced a black mother to change her baby on the floor. We must respond quickly and decisively. Silence will look like an admission of guilt. One of the legal counsels interjected. "We need to be cautious about liability and any potential lawsuits. A direct admission of wrongdoing could be problematic." Whitmore stopped pacing. "We need to reach out to Ms. Graves, personally, offer compensation. We can't let this get any bigger. Our stock is already down 3% this morning." Samantha nodded. "We'll draft a statement, offering a formal apology, emphasize our commitment to reviewing policies around traveling families, and mention that we're conducting a thorough investigation." Whitmore nodded. "Do it. And I want Poogan Harris removed from active duty until we figure this out." A hush fell over the room, a mixture of relief and apprehension. Heads bowed over laptops, drafting statements and emails. The corporate machine roared to life, readying its official spin on the situation. That afternoon, Aniyah found herself in front of a webcam, a local news anchor from Atlanta. Interviewing her remotely, she had debated whether to accept media requests, worried about turning her grandmother's birthday celebration into a media circus. But the sense of injustice burned fiercely in her, and she knew that shining a spotlight on it might force real change. The interview began with the anchor offering condolences for her ordeal. Aniyah recounted the flight experience, Poogan's refusal to let her use the lavatory, the condescending tone, and how she had no choice but to change King on the floor. She stressed that while the entire crew wasn't at fault, Poogan's behavior highlighted how a single flight attendant's lack of empathy could escalate into a humiliating situation. The anchor leaned forward. "Aniyah, Some critics suggest you overreacted, that you could have handled it differently. What do you say to them? Aniyah's hand tightened around King's. Try being a single mother, traveling with an infant. When a flight attendant who holds authority in that environment repeatedly tells you, "No!" What are you supposed to do? Let your baby sit in a leaking diaper for hours. My hands were tied. And it's not just me. Other mothers have come forward with similar stories of not feeling supported on flights. We need better policies and training for airline staff, so no parent is forced into such a situation. The anchor nodded sympathetically. Delta has said they're investigating. Have they reached out to you personally? She paused. Their social media team sent me messages asking for my booking details, and someone claiming to be from customer relations emailed me an apology, along with a $200 voucher for future travel. But this isn't about money. It's about ensuring no mother goes through this again, and addressing the deeper issue: was this just a bad employee, or does it reflect systemic flaws in how airlines handle mothers traveling alone, particularly women of color? The anchor thanked Aniyah for her courage. The interview ended. Within an hour, clips of it appeared online, fueling more conversations and debates. Support for Aniyah grew, with many praising her for speaking out. Critics questioned if race was truly a factor, or just an unfortunate misunderstanding. Yet the public consensus increasingly sided with Aniyah, seeing her story as emblematic of how corporations can fail vulnerable customers. As the controversy swelled, Poogan Harris found herself confined to her small one-bedroom apartment in Atlanta, suspended from duty pending investigation. She was bombarded with hateful messages once her name leaked online. Strangers on social media dug up her Facebook profile, hurling insults. The press hovered outside her apartment building, hoping to catch a statement. She refused to speak publicly, but she was furious. She paced around her living room, reading the viral tweets and news articles on her laptop. She believed she was being scapegoated. In her view, she had only been doing her job enforcing safety protocols. When she had told Aniyah to remain seated, Poogan genuinely believed turbulence could resume. She had once experienced severe turbulence that injured a passenger who was in the aisle. But in the chaos of that flight, she admitted to herself that maybe she could have handled things differently. Her pride, however, didn't allow her to express regret. Instead, resentment festered. She felt singled out in a massive corporate meltdown. On the third night of her suspension, Poogan received a letter from Delta's legal department, reminding her that any public statement she made must align with corporate guidelines. They offered minimal guidance and left her isolated. She realized the airline was protecting itself first. If blame had to fall, it might well land squarely on her shoulders. For the first time, Poogan felt the weight of being just another employee, expendable in the eyes of a giant corporation. She clutched her phone, scanning the tweets. She saw one that read, "Fire Poogan Harris. Boycott Delta." Her breath caught in her throat. The fear that she might lose her job was palpable. A swirl of conflicting emotions gripped her: anger, fear, bitterness, regret. She was grappling with the question, did I really cause all this? As the days passed, Delta's stock price continued its downward slide. Investors panicked, wondering if the negative publicity would permanently damage the brand. Competitor airlines capitalized on the situation, releasing subtle ads, highlighting their family-friendly policies. Activists and social media users pounced on the chance to highlight broader issues of racial bias and the struggles of traveling mothers. A few politicians even weighed in, calling for airlines to ensure better accommodations for diaper changing and policies to prevent harassment of parents. Under enormous pressure, CEO George Whitmore scheduled a live press conference. The auditorium at Delta's headquarters was packed with reporters. Cameras flashed as Whitmore stepped to the podium. "Good afternoon." He began, his tone somber. "Over the past week, our airline has faced serious allegations regarding the treatment of Ms. Aniyah Graves and her infant son, King First. And foremost, I want to apologize personally to Ms. Graves. No mother should ever feel mistreated or forced into humiliating circumstances on one of our flights. We have reached out to her directly and will continue to do so." He paused, scanning the room. Delta is launching a comprehensive review of our policies surrounding in-flight infant care, turbulence protocols, and customer service training. In the meantime, the flight attendant involved has been placed on administrative leave while we complete an internal investigation. We take these allegations very seriously and will hold accountable any employee found to have violated our standards of professionalism and customer care. The press members clamored with questions. One voice rose above the rest. "Mr. Whitmore, do you think racism was a factor in this incident?" Whitmore, looking briefly flustered, replied, "Our investigation is ongoing. We have a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination. If our findings reveal any bias or misconduct, we will take swift disciplinary action. I can't comment further until the investigation is complete." Though the press conference aimed to quell the storm, it only inflamed it. Social media teemed with criticism, calling Whitmore's statements performative and vague. Advocates demanded tangible policy changes, not just promises. More employees came forward anonymously, sharing stories of being told to limit extra help to passengers of color, though these allegations were unverified and varied widely. The swirling chaos showed no signs of abating. Meanwhile, Aniyah's grandmother's birthday celebration had come and gone. Aniyah now found herself in the center of a growing movement she never intended to lead. She received hundreds of messages from mothers recounting airline horror stories, some horrifying, others borderline comical. Journalists kept hounding her for interviews. She also felt the darker side of the internet, trolls accusing her of orchestrating the drama for attention, or even calling her derogatory names tied to her race. She shielded herself from most of it by filtering her social media settings. But it was exhausting and took an emotional toll. Delta's attempts at reconciliation felt half-hearted to her. A $200 voucher was a laughable gesture given the scale of trauma embarrassment and the subsequent public backlash. The offered private meeting with a Delta representative to discuss her experience also felt more like a legal tactic to keep her quiet than a genuine attempt to fix the issue. Each time she considered meeting them, she thought about Poogan's face, above her scolding her for changing her baby on the floor. But then came an unexpected turn. A civil rights lawyer in Atlanta named Maurice Dupree reached out offering to represent Aniyah pro bono if she wanted to pursue legal action. He had been part of high-profile discrimination cases and believed Aniyah's case could set an important precedent for airline responsibilities toward parents and minority travelers. Conflicted Aniyah weighed her options. She wasn't the type to sue for money, but the concept of forcing a corporate policy change intrigued her. Before she could decide, fate intervened in a bizarre way. 5 days after the incident, Poogan Harris was contacted by an internal investigator who requested a meeting at Delta's headquarters. Poogan arrived anxious and defensive, prepared to fight for her job. She was ushered into a plain conference room where Linda Feng and 2 other executives sat waiting with stern expressions. They proceeded with formalities, asking Poogan to recount the incident from her perspective. Poogan insisted she was only following protocol due to turbulence concerns. Linda then showed Pugan multiple passenger video clips, which depicted Pugan ignoring Aniyah's pleas and then snapping at her on the floor. The footage painted Pugan in a harsh light. Pugan swallowed hard. She tried to explain that the pilot had warned her of more turbulence, that she had seen passengers injured in the past. When ignoring warnings, Linda listened but remained non-committal. After the interview, Pugan was dismissed, told to await further instructions. She left feeling a sense of dread. It seemed they were building a case to fire her. However, on her way out, Pugan overheard raised voices coming from an adjacent conference room. Curiosity piqued, she lingered for a moment. Through the thin walls, she caught snippets of conversation. We told them not to push this. PR fallout. Potential settlement. Hush money. Pugan's eyes widened. She realized the airline might be more concerned with burying the scandal than finding the truth. A spark of defiance flickered in her. If Delta was going to throw her under the bus, she wasn't going down without a fight. That evening, Pugan typed out a long email detailing how the airline pressured flight attendants to minimize extra accommodations for passengers who seemed overly demanding, a policy she felt was often applied disproportionately to people of color. She attached documents from her training sessions, screenshots of slides that stressed the importance of avoiding scenes and enforcing compliance swiftly. Though not overtly racist, Pugan believed the subtext empowered flight attendants to discriminate under the guise of following regulations. She CC'd senior executives, and even the CEO's email. She threatened to release the documents publicly if they tried to fire her without a fair hearing. Within hours, Pugan received a phone call from Linda Feng, urging her not to escalate matters. But Pugan was done. Being polite. Aniyah, meanwhile, was unaware of the internal drama. She was back in Harlem, having returned early from Atlanta to avoid overshadowing her grandmother's milestone. Still unsure about taking legal action, she was torn between wanting justice and desiring peace. Then her phone buzzed with a direct message from an unlikely source, Pugan Harris. The message was short, almost apologetic. Ms. Graves, this is Pugan Harris. I'm the flight attendant from your recent Delta flight. I know you have every right to hate me, but there's more to this story than you realize. Please let's talk. Aniyah stared at her phone, stunned. Did Pugan want to harass her further, or was she trying to apologize? Torn by conflicting emotions, she decided to respond. They arranged a video call. When Pugan's face appeared on the screen, Aniyah felt her stomach twist. Memories of that humiliating moment flooded back, but Pugan's demeanor was subdued, not defensive or combative. I'm sorry for what happened, Pugan began quietly. I realize I could have handled things much better. Aniyah nodded curtly, still wary. Why contact me now? Pugan swallowed. Because I'm being railroaded by Delta. They want to blame everything on me. But the truth is, I was following strict instructions they drilled into us. They told us if we suspect any risk, even minor turbulence, to keep passengers seated, and they emphasize not giving special treatment because it might lead to requests spiraling out of control. I see now how that can be twisted into discriminatory behavior. Aniyah listened, speechless. Pugan continued explaining the internal policies and how she had threatened to release evidence, showing how the airline's training essentially encouraged flight attendants to err on the side of denial rather than empathy. I'm reaching out because I'm going to fight them, and I think we might have a stronger case if we join forces. I know I'm partially at fault, but the entire system enabled this. For a moment, neither spoke. The weight of the proposition hung heavily. Aniyah felt a flicker of sympathy for Pugan. Despite everything, Pugan was also a cog in a bigger machine. Yet she remembered the shame of kneeling on the floor. King crying. She took a breath. "I'm not sure I'm ready to be allies," she said carefully. "But I'm willing to hear more." In the weeks that followed, Pugan's leaked documents began circulating anonymously, online, fueling the controversy around Delta's training protocols. Whistleblower websites picked up the story, painting a picture of an airline that prioritized quick compliance over genuine customer care. Aniyah found herself in a complicated position, both outraged at Pugan's previous behavior and intrigued by the bigger picture Pugan unveiled. Aniyah and Pugan met in a neutral lawyer's office in Midtown Manhattan. Maurice Dupree, the civil rights attorney, was there, representing Aniyah. Pugan arrived with a union representative, though she wasn't officially part of a union, hoping for some form of legal counsel. Tension was thick as they sat across from each other at a long mahogany table. After awkward greetings, Pugan spoke first. "I know you have no reason to trust me, but Delta's trying to bury this. They're pushing me out quietly, offering severance if I sign an NDA. They want to keep the focus on me and away from their policies." Dupree leaned forward. "And how does Miss Graves factor into this?" Pugan inhaled, looking Aniyah in the eye. "If we show that Delta's policies are inherently flawed, that they encourage staff to treat certain passengers with less empathy, Miss Graves's case gets stronger. It's not just about me being a bad apple, it's about the orchard." Aniyah shifted uncomfortably. She still felt the sting of Pugan's conduct, yet she recognized the broader ramifications. "I want systemic change," she finally said. "I want them to have real guidelines for helping parents traveling with babies, for how to handle emergencies that aren't just about seatbelts. I want them to address the racial bias in how they train staff." Pugan nodded. "I'll stand with you on that. But I also want my job back, or at least a fair hearing. I'm not proud of what happened, but I won't be the scapegoat for their entire system." Dupree and the union rep exchanged glances. It was an unprecedented alliance, the aggrieved passenger and the flight attendant who wronged her. But the two realized they had a common foe in Delta's corporate machinery. After hours of discussion, they outlined a strategy to push for a joint settlement that included policy reforms, retraining for flight attendants, and a separate hearing for Pugan's case. With the threat of a joint lawsuit looming, Delta's legal team scrambled. Public sentiment had already shifted heavily against the airline news that Pugan, previously seen as the antagonist, was now exposing questionable training guidelines, made the airline look even worse. Aniyah and Pugan were invited to a mediation session at a high-end law firm in Atlanta. CEO George Whitmore and Linda Fang were present, along with a team of corporate lawyers. Dupree represented Aniyah. Pugan had an employment attorney from the union. Though she wasn't an official union member, he volunteered to support her due to the significance of her case. The tension in the room was palpable. Whitmore appeared more contrite than in his previous press conference. He began by apologizing again to Aniyah. She sat stoically, meeting his gaze with a calm determination. Pugan, for her part, stared straight ahead, occasionally biting her lip. Whitmore's lead counsel laid out an offer, a significant financial settlement for Aniyah, if she agreed not to file a discrimination lawsuit or speak publicly about the matter. Pugan would receive a severance package and a neutral reference, effectively ending her career at Delta, but preventing a messy lawsuit. Aniyah glanced at Dupree, then Pugan. "That doesn't address the larger policy failures," Dupree said, crossing his arms. "Our clients want an overhaul of how you handle traveling mothers, especially those with infants. They want mandatory training that includes implicit bias. Education." Linda Fang stiffened. We're willing to implement a revised training module for our flight attendants, focusing on infant care and passenger assistance. We can incorporate some bias awareness content." Poogan spoke up for the first time. "And what about me? You're basically paying me to go away. I'm not the monster you painted me to be in the media. I want a fair hearing, and if I'm cleared, I want my job back. I've been a loyal employee for years." An uncomfortable silence followed. Whitmore cleared his throat, says Harris. "Your conduct was questionable. However, if the review finds you were simply following protocol, we can consider reinstating you in a different capacity. But we can't promise you'll remain in a customer-facing role." Poogan exhaled, looking deflated, but not defeated Dupree. And Aniyah exchanged a glance. Aniyah knew Poogan still bore personal responsibility for how she treated her. But she also believed Poogan shouldn't shoulder the blame for a flawed corporate culture. "We want a formal acknowledgement," Aniyah said softly. "An acknowledgement that Delta's policies contributed to this incident, and a commitment to real change." Whitmore nodded, though the reluctance in his eyes was clear. The meeting ended after hours of negotiation. With an agreement in principle, Delta would pay Aniyah a settlement, incorporate new mandatory training, addressing infant care and implicit bias, and place Poogan on probationary status, with a chance to be rehired after the internal investigation. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was a monumental shift. Chapter 20. The conclusion of the saga. Word of the settlement leaked to the media. Public opinion, while still critical of Delta, applauded Aniyah for not just taking a payout, but demanding policy reforms. Poogan, once vilified, found some empathy from those who saw her as a whistleblower. Delta's brand suffered a blow. Their stock price had dipped significantly over the course of the scandal, but they began a slow climb, back after announcing new family-friendly policies, expanded training, and a partnership with parenting advocacy groups. Aniyah returned to her life in Harlem, forging a new path as an advocate for traveling mothers. She wrote op-eds about her experience, consulted for organizations pushing airlines to be more parent-friendly, and occasionally spoke at conferences about how a single incident could spark major corporate shifts. She received enough settlement money to secure a comfortable future for King. But more importantly, she had made an impact. King, blissfully unaware of his role in history, continued to grow, giggle and chase after every new experience. With boundless curiosity, Poogan's future remained uncertain. After a thorough investigation, Delta offered to rehire her under probation, placing her on a route with a supervisor, monitoring her performance. She accepted. Some co-workers shunned her, fearing her whistleblowing, but others respected her courage in exposing flaws within the company. Over time, Poogan tried to rebuild her reputation, practicing more empathy with passengers, especially those traveling with children. She bore the scars of the scandal, yet she emerged with a deeper understanding of how a rigid policy can harm customers if enforced without compassion. Meanwhile, within corporate circles, the saga became a cautionary tale about the power of social media. 3 tweets had tanked a mighty airline stock and forced sweeping changes. Conversations on diversity, equity, and customer service grew louder in boardrooms across the aviation industry. In the end, that flight from New York to Atlanta was just a routine route, one of thousands flown each day. Yet it left a profound mark on everyone involved. Aniyah's 3 tweets shook a corporate giant. An unyielding flight attendant nearly lost everything, but found redemption in exposing systemic flaws, and an airline learned that ignoring a mother's cry can lead to a roar heard around the world. Thank you for joining me on this roller coaster of a journey, where a single flight turned into a catalyst for corporate reform and unexpected alliances. Aniyah's courage in speaking up, fueled by the fierce love for her son King, unleashed a tidal wave of change that echoed through boardrooms and reshaped airline policies. Pugan's role, initially seen as the villain, revealed deeper issues of flawed systems, hidden biases, and the limits of blind obedience to corporate rules. In the end, real empathy and accountability triumphed, proving that one voice, especially when united with others, can topple giants. If you found this story as gripping and inspiring as I did, please like this video, share it with friends and family, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more powerful and thought-provoking tales. Your support helps keep these stories alive and spreading. Thank you for watching.